This is sodium. It's a soft, reactive metal. You probably remember it from high school chemistry class. When it touches water, it reacts violently. It generates massive heat, hydrogen gas, and inevitably, it explodes. It is unstable, it is dangerous, and it hates water. This is a submarine, a vessel built to operate under crushing pressure, surrounded by millions of tons of water. Now, imagine if the U.S. Navy decided to take that explosive metal, melt it down into a liquid, and pump thousands of gallons of it through the heart of a nuclear submarine. It sounds like madness. But in the 1950s, it was considered the future. This is the story of the USS Seawolf, the submarine that promised to be more efficient than the Nautilus, and arguably the most dangerous machine the Navy ever put to sea. A ship where a single leaking pipe wouldn't just cause a flood, it would turn the engine room into a radioactive bomb. It was an experiment that failed so catastrophically, the Navy's solution sounds like something out of a fever dream. To understand why anyone thought this was a good idea, we have to look at the early days of the nuclear navy. In the late 1940s, Captain Hyman G. Rickover wasn't sure which reactor technology was going to win. Nobody had ever put a nuclear reactor on a boat before, so Rickover bet on two different horses. Horse number one was the USS Nautilus. It used a pressurized water reactor. This was the safe bet. Water is stable. We understand it. And it's everywhere. But water has a major downside. It boils at 100 degrees Celsius. To keep it liquid at the temperatures needed for a reactor, you have to keep it under immense pressure, around 2,250 psi. That means heavy piping, thick steel hulls, and the constant risk of a steam explosion. Horse number two was the USS Seawolf. This was the high-performance bet. Instead of water, it used the S2G liquid sodium reactor. On paper, sodium is a dream. It conducts heat far more efficiently than water, roughly 100 times better. You don't need high pressure. You can run the reactor at low pressure, a fraction of what a PWR requires, which should, in theory, allow for lighter pipes and a more compact design. And because sodium is such a good coolant, you can make the reactor physically smaller while generating more power. It was like comparing a heavy diesel truck to a Formula One car, at least on paper. The Seawolf was designed to squeeze more power from a more efficient system. But there is no such thing as a free lunch in physics, and the Seawolf would prove that in spectacular fashion. The moment the Seawolf powered up, the crew discovered they were living inside a machine that wanted to kill them in three different ways. The first was invisible. When water flows through a reactor core, it becomes radioactive, but that radioactivity fades within seconds. When sodium flows through a reactor core, it becomes intensely radioactive and stays that way for days. The crew was locked out of their own engine room. Not a single reactor compartment entry was made during the roughly 2 years the S2G operated. If a valve needed adjustment, too bad. If a gauge looked wrong, no one could check it. They were operating a nuclear reactor they couldn't touch. The second problem never slept. Water freezes at 0 degrees. Sodium freezes at 98 degrees Celsius. If the system ever cooled below that point, thousands of gallons of liquid metal would solidify into a block inside the pipes. Once that happened, the reactor was dead, permanently. The pipes would crack as the metal contracted. There was no restart, so the Seawolf ran heaters around the clock. In port, at sea, it didn't matter. The crew fought a 24/7 battle against thermodynamics just to keep their own reactor from freezing solid. It was, as one might put it, like babysitting a bomb that needed to stay warm. The third problem was the one that kept them awake. A submarine is a humid, wet environment. Sodium doesn't just dislike water, it detonates on contact. Inside the Seawolf's steam generators, high-pressure steam ran inches away from liquid sodium, separated only by thin metal tubes. If a crack formed, if the barrier failed, the result wouldn't be a leak. It would be a chemical explosion combined with a radioactive fire, one you couldn't extinguish with water, because water would only make it worse. Every man aboard understood this. Every watch, they listened for the sounds that meant their world was about to end. Despite all of this, the Seawolf worked. She went to sea. She submerged. She was fast. For a brief window in 1956, it looked like liquid metal might actually be the future of naval propulsion. Then the superheaters began to fail. The superheaters were the most complex component of the system, a maze of thin-walled stainless steel tubes where the hot sodium transferred its heat to water, generating the steam that drove the turbines. Microcracks appeared from thermal stress. The barrier between sodium and steam was breaking down. The crew discovered leaks, then more leaks. Each one was a countdown to catastrophe that had to be patched before it blew. Rickover, now a rear admiral, looked at the data. The USS Nautilus, with its boring, reliable water reactor, was breaking records and preparing to cross under the North Pole. The Seawolf, with its elegant liquid metal technology, was stuck in port getting its cracks welded. Rickover was a ruthless pragmatist. By late 1956, he had seen enough. He informed the Atomic Energy Commission that he would take steps to replace the sodium reactor with a water-cooled plant. The Seawolf would be converted to a pressurized water reactor, just like the Nautilus. But that left the Navy with a problem no one had ever faced before. What do you do with a reactor vessel that's coated in radioactive sodium? You can't recycle it. You can't just bury it. The sodium had to be kept warm or chemically converted, a complex, dangerous process that no one had fully worked out yet. The Navy's solution was to dump it at sea. On April 18, 1959, workers cut a 30-foot section out of the Seawolf's hull. The entire reactor compartment, vessel, shielding, piping, and all, was sealed inside its original stainless steel container. They loaded it onto a barge. They towed it out of the shipyard past the coastline, 120 miles due east of Maryland, to a point in the Atlantic where the ocean floor drops away into darkness. 9,000 feet of water, nearly 2 miles down, a place where sunlight has never reached, where the pressure would crush a human body in an instant. And then they sank the barge, sending the reactor on a long descent through 9,000 feet of black water to the ocean floor. It's still there, presumably. The Navy expected the radioactive materials to decay before the containment vessel deteriorated. But by 1980, the Navy reported it was unable to relocate the container. The reactor sits somewhere in the crushing silence of the deep Atlantic, a sealed tomb containing the remains of the most ambitious and most dangerous propulsion experiment the Navy ever attempted. Its exact location has been lost to history. The USS Seawolf was rebuilt with a standard pressurized water reactor. She was recommissioned in September 1960 and served with distinction until her decommissioning in March 1987, over a quarter-century of service with her new, reliable power plant. But she's remembered for that brief, terrifying window in the 1950s when we tried to put fire and water inside the same steel tube and expected them to coexist. The lesson was learned the hard way. In the ocean, the best technology isn't always the one with the highest performance specs. It's the one that doesn't explode when it gets wet.